look, you are the difference between law and order and chaos. And I recognize that. And they talk about the thin blue line, but I don't think people really fully appreciate how thin the blue line can get from time to time.
Yes,
but anyway, so thank you for recognizing those good people. They're outstanding. But thank you for what you've done too in terms of leadership and taking a look inward and just saying, okay, I think I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and being willing to pull the trigger. And thank you for doing all those things.
Yes, sir.
So tell us a little bit what you have done, since you've been here for the 8 months. Other than I know you have done a great job in community appearances and being present, building relationships in the community. And when I say community, I mean the entirety of the community. And that's a big deal because that's where relationship starts, and that's where communication starts, and that's where trust is built. So that's a big deal for me.
Sir. And you're absolutely right, Mayor. Earning the trust of the citizens in which we serve is very essential in the job that we do, not only as a police chief, but every officer that wear the badge, our administrative staff within the building.
Right.
So, the first few months in my onboarding process, I took the opportunity to go meet many of our stakeholders within the city of Rocky Mount. And that included also going to a lot of community activities and events. Because that gave me the opportunity, one, to get to introduce myself to citizens, but also hear what their concerns were personally. And then what ideas and solutions they wanted to offer their police chief. Because, yes, I'm the police chief for the city of Rocky Mount and I lead the department, but I also let all the citizens that I come in contact that I'm also their police chief.
You're right. I mean, different communities experience different issues and different perspective and a different lens. So how do you match that up with public safety? I mean, because each officer is a little bit different too. So that feels like that's a little bit more of an art form than perhaps a science. But how do you do that?
Well, it's not, I'm not going to say, well, I guess it could be an art form, but luckily we have a district commander type concept within the department. So each of our 4 districts, we break the city down into 4 separate districts. Each one has its own commander who is responsible to address concerns and issues within those neighborhoods. So typically I'll bring those concerns back, talk with the division commander, and we will also include our division or our district commander, and then let's have that open discussion about here's the concerns that are being given to the chief that we're hearing.
Right.
What are some of the solutions? And we also will consider the solutions that was given to us. And then we'll assign those out to the respective officers within that district to try to address those concerns with those citizens. As you had stated earlier, now I've been here for 8 months?
8 months,
solid months.
Yeah, right.
And, we've seen some significant decreases over those 8 months. We were fortunate. At the end of 2021, we were looking at our numbers, and we've seen decreases in violent crime, property crime across the board.
Right.
Overall, both of those 2 categories together, around 20% decreases. That's very significant. And I think we've seen those decreases because more and more proactive responses from the police department, which means we're listening to our citizens and we're dealing with those actual issues, whether it's speeding, whether it's congregating of individuals, suspicious activity, whether it's complaints about drugs or any other kind of crime. We're dealing with those issues immediately. And the only way we can do that is by listening to our citizens.
Right. Well, and with that said, and this is just anecdotal from my own perspective, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it feels like we are maybe not making more arrests, but it feels like that more of the arrests are receiving convictions just based on what I've seen. And you guys seem to have done a pretty daggone good job of catching people pretty quickly, trying to close out the case pretty quickly. Is that holding true in the statistics? I have no idea, but anecdotally, that's just how it feels outside kind of looking in.
Typically, if you look at our clearance rates for property crime, violent crime, any of the most egregious crime, homicide or murder, our clearance rates are typically a little bit better than the national averages.
Okay.
So I have a great team of investigators and patrol officers out in the field who ensure that when they go to a situation, they're looking for every bit of evidence they can to help identify who the offender is. They're looking for those witnesses that may be in the area who can give us that one-on-one, that factual information to help us identify somebody. And then we're doing a better job in canvassing the area.
Right.
Ensuring if there's doorbell cameras. I don't know how many cities, you can go ride down any street
Right.
and you see a number of doorbell cameras. So we're looking for those doorbell cameras. We're looking for businesses with cameras to hopefully they have captured some video.
Right.
So you're right. We have seen some increases in our clearance rates over the last several months, and we hope that we're going to continue to solve more cases.
Right, and of course, and I think that's a beautiful thing. So you brought up technology, so let's talk about that's something that you have made a pitch to City Council, and you've received some funding, both for shot spotters and shot cameras, but then even the Atlas system, and then which even has a greater vision and perhaps capability as we go forward. Just describe that a little bit. I find it exciting. And scary, all kind of rolled into one, right? But more exciting than anything else, particularly in a world where we're having a difficult time finding personnel to do any job. I mean, whether it's help me, flip a burger to certainly law enforcement to just pick a job. Everybody's challenged by finding good personnel. And so technologies matter in terms of helping stretch the existing labor force and make them more effective. But I'm not going to do justice to the proposed technology, but I just think it's something that everybody ought to hear because I'm just really excited about the prospect of it.
Yes, sir. One of our newest piece of technologies that we implemented was, as you mentioned, the Atlas One or our My RMT app. And, I look at that as a way to better inform our citizens of what's going on within our community. Another way of staying connected to our citizens. So if we have issues within a particular neighborhood, we've seen an uptick, let's say in maybe someone's going into some vehicles illegally, or we have a missing child.
Right.
We're able to, any citizen who signs up in the RMT app, we're able to get that information directly to them from their phone using the app. So it's a better way to keep citizens informed, and that way they know what's going on in their neighborhoods, so that way they can better protect themselves. Because, if we've seen an uptick in vehicle break-ins or some thefts, and you get that message on your app and it's in your neighborhood or somewhere nearby, then you're going to make sure you take those tips we give you and you're going to put those to good use to prevent yourself becoming a victim of a crime.
Sure.
So we were very pleased with the My RMT app. We're sending out a good amount of information to the citizens,
right?
That we hope will help keep them safe,
right?
And then we talked about Fuses.
Right.
Fuses is a platform where we're pulling in multiple cameras that we already have access to.
Sure.
We have a number of city-owned cameras within the city, but also we install a number of cameras in specific areas in our city. That if a crime or situation happens in that area, then hopefully those cameras will capture pertinent video that can then be used later to help identify those offenders and the type of vehicle they were driving that can hopefully lead to a successful conviction.
So how does that work? So a crime is committed in a particular area. Do you canvass and say, Mrs. Jones, I noticed you have a Ring doorbell, and can we have access to it? Or is it something that I can say, hey, Chief, I've got this Ring doorbell, and just as an extra precaution, I would love for you to be able to tap into it at any moment in time and use it at your discretion. How does that work? I mean, or is it both? If and, I don't know.
Well, it could be. We haven't went to that next step yet.
I got you.
But we do canvass and we ask citizens for access to their doorbell cameras, or if they have a home security camera system, whether it's a residence or a business. And they typically, I haven't found many citizens who will say no to that.
Sure.
Because they all want to do their part and help solve any issue or crime we have going on in the particular area. But the system has those capabilities, but we haven't moved to that next phase.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm getting about 5 steps ahead. I get it. But that's part of the exciting part of it to me is when you start looking at the overlapping capabilities and the impact that could potentially have for public safety. It's just tremendous, really.
You're totally correct, Mayor. The unique thing about Fuses is if we have an incident within the city and we locate it on the Fuses system on a map, then we're able to draw a circle or a diameter circle around that location where we had an incident, and it automatically identifies what cameras we do have access to. So then we can immediately start reviewing that video footage to identify any offenders or suspects that may have been walking away from that location or any vehicles that may have been leaving that area. So it makes it a lot easier for my staff to pull the cameras that's in a particular area that we need to look at some video evidence.
Sure. Well, going back to the app, so if I notice something going on and I input into the app, is that something that you want me to do actively, or is that something I should call the police first, or is introduction of that information into the app as good as calling you 911?
Well,
or is it all the above? I'm really sure. I mean, I've got it. I look at it, and what you realize is that we all just need to be vigilant, no matter where you are. But
you're absolutely right. It's another way to communicate with one of my officers.
Okay.
If it's not an emergency,
right?
And when I say if it's not somewhere, if someone's in danger of getting hurt,
right?
You're getting hurt,
right?
If that's the case, then immediately call 911.
Sure.
But if it's information that you may have witnessed a crime, you may suspect a crime have occurred, or you just have a question for an officer, you either can call our non-emergency number, but through that app, there is a messaging feature.
Right.
And we have staff that when you send a message through the app, they will get an alert that citizen, say Y, wants to communicate with you, and we can actually text back and forth using the application.
Okay.
And if there is not an officer or a staff member available at the time, then we will get that alert immediately once they do log into the system. But typically during the daytime hours, there's always someone who's going to get that message.
Right.
And it's actually two-way. And if a citizen don't want to reveal their identity, they can conceal their profile and just be anonymous.
Right.
So if they just want to give the information, they can use one of our number of tip applications, whether it's Crime Stoppers or Text a Tip, or they can go on the My RMT app and hit message, or a virtual officer feature, hit message, and then send us that message directly.
And so it just becomes a data point. You can see the pattern, and that helps you solve stuff too.
It can be.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, you're so precise about that. Where do you see public safety going forward? I mean, you've done a great job in call it reorganizing the police department, helping integrate into the community and build relationships in the community. And it feels like that your clearance rate is really good. So where do you see policing of the future, both here in Rocky Mount and public safety? What are your top goals? And then where do you see it kind of heading nationally? Because that's also an issue. We're just a byproduct of what's happening around us.
Well, first, better recruitment.
Sure.
We do have a few vacancies with the department, and we've done an excellent job over the last several months. We've hired at least 20 or so officers that have joined the ranks of the Rocky Mount Police Department, but we still have a few positions that are vacant.
Okay.
Whether it's a police officer or telecommunications or another administrative support position. So going forward, I would love to continue our recruitment efforts. We're attending many job fairs, career fairs, going to summer school events, other community events, and we're always making sure that our staff, our recruiting staff and others have all the materials they need to make sure that we're explaining to the community what the Rocky Mount Police Department has to offer. We have an on-duty crime analyst who looks at all of our crime statistics and where those crimes are occurring within our city.
Right.
And then we identify areas where we're seeing slight increases or spikes in crime.
Right.
Then we create a packet, an enhanced focus patrol packet, which is given to the district commander. And throughout their patrol shift, each officer within that assigned district creates a strategic plan to actually have high visibility patrols and patrols those identified locations to identify what the issues are in that particular neighborhood. And hopefully what we're going to do is we're going to identify those problems, reduce those crime numbers from going up even further. And then at the same time, as they're in those neighborhoods patrolling, they're making that connection with those citizens, with our citizens. And hopefully they will give us additional information that can help us identify those individuals who are committing crimes in that particular area in our city. And again, the goal is to help us continue to reduce the numbers.
Oh, look, you cannot out-arrest the problem. There's no such thing. You just cannot out-arrest the problem. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than that. But what you're talking about, I think I read a study recently that that approach decreased crime, and I believe it was in Baltimore. I may be wrong. It may have been Memphis, by something like 30%. Just going to where the crime is and trying to understand why. and how can I impact it? And is it a show of force, or is it some underlying problem that maybe I can touch or reach, or maybe it's not one size fits all. But anyway, that's what I'm hearing, and I think that's outstanding. So that just started, right?
Yes, sir. And that's why it's important that if there are any organizations within our city who have a program, whether it's geared towards mental illness, whether it's
Right.
geared towards drug addiction or abuse, or homelessness,
Right.
we need to have partnerships with those agencies. So when we're within those communities throughout our city, and we see individuals that can take advantage of those services and programs, the police officer can be that connection.
Right.
We know we wear many hats,
Yeah.
but there are many professionals and experts within our community that are leading and have these programs that we can make that connection and get these individuals in them.
Sure.
So that hopefully it won't lead to further significant consequences where they're committing crime or further crime, or having the police have to respond, and
Right.
hopefully it wouldn't lead to an arrest. But because as you said, we can't arrest our way out of these issues.
No.
So if we come across an individual and we suspect there may be drug addiction or drug abuse, we need to make sure we make that connection to a program to assist him or her,
Right.
alleviating that ill.
Right. So how does that work? I mean, you do touch mental health a lot, so in my day job, I do a lot in the post-acute healthcare space. I do believe the state of North Carolina should have accepted a Medicaid expansion years ago, but if we can get it done sooner than later, then that would be a great thing. But mental health is almost always the one thing that never really quite gets the funding that it needs. Yeah.
Within the Rocky Mount Police Department, all our staff eventually get crisis intervention training, and we make sure those officers go through that training because that will help them identify that the individual they're in front of, they're facing at that moment, is going through something else. It's not nothing criminal. It's
Right.
possibly a sign of mental illness. And once they've identified the signs and they feel they have a situation where a person needs help, they then connect that person with the appropriate healthcare provider within our community. We're currently having conversations with East Point and Trillium
Right.
and even UNC Nash
Sure.
about trying to come up with a more comprehensive and strategic approach to mental illness within our community. So that way, when the officers do contact the individuals, they know what steps they need to take, calling those hotlines, getting that healthcare provider notified so they can respond directly on the scene while the officer is there to make sure the scene is safe for them. So that way, that healthcare provider can then get that individual into the right program to fit their need at
Right.
that moment. Because we're not going to rest our way out of this,
No.
and can't just think we can just take these individuals to the hospital and try to do IVC commitments on them and
Right.
such. We need to try to connect them directly to these mobile crisis
Right.
individuals so they can do a proper assessment.
Right.
It's our job to identify you have someone going through a crisis.
But I appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that, you're having to make that split second decision. Is this a public safety issue? Is this a mental health issue? Is force appropriate or not appropriate? What level of force may be appropriate or not appropriate? Do I arrest? I mean, there's a myriad of the decision tree. I mean, so training, I guess, is the answer. And I appreciate your commitment to that.
Yes, sir. We put a lot of hours, a lot of funds into our training program with the department, not just the mandated in-service training, but a lot of enhanced training that our officers go through. I already mentioned the CIT training, our crisis
Right.
intervention team training, but also de-escalation and partial policing training, explicit and implicit bias training.
Right.
So there's a host of other training courses that we have either in-house or we send our staff to training facilities, whether it's at Edgecombe Community
Mhm.
College or Nash Community College or Wake Tech
Right.
over in Wilson. We're always looking for training opportunities to enhance our officer skills and abilities. Because when we talk about de-escalation and partial policing, we want to make sure when our officers go to these calls, we have the skills and the training to help de-escalate situations and not escalate them.
Right.
So that way it won't lead to hopefully something more bigger
Sure.
and pressing.
Sure.
And we also want to make sure that officers are understanding what services that we have and what procedures we must follow to deal with a particular issue. And that's when we start talking about procedural justice. We
Right.
want to make sure when our officers respond to these calls, they can handle that situation and hopefully alleviate us having to go back.
Right. Right. So how many in-service hours is your expectation that, the average guy on your force or girl on your force would go through on an annual basis?
They're getting ready for about 60 to 75 hours.
See, and I think folks need to hear that. I mean,
They
that's a week and a half of training every year. And that probably still feels not enough, and you can't beat it over and over and over, but that's a lot of training.
It's a lot. And then that's training that we require our officers to go to.
Right.
But then we allow our officers, if they have a particular track or field they would like to go into the department. For example, you may have an officer who one day see themselves being an investigator.
Okay.
So they could speak with our training officer and work out a career development plan.
Okay.
So that way officer can start taking some of those courses that will help prepare them to have the skills to become an investigator one day.
Well, that's exciting. How many people take advantage of that? I hope everybody.
Well,
but I'm sure that's not exactly true.
A good number of our officers take advantage of that.
Okay.
I'm constantly signing training orders on my desk, and I believe sometimes my training sergeant, he'll get a stack of 30, 40 of them and put on my desk for me to sign and approve. But we have a lot of officers that take advantage of those training opportunities. And then if a supervisor have an officer that they've noticed, we put a lot of emphasis on monitoring what training officers are taking. If they notice an officer hasn't put in for some training in a good little while, then other than what we require them to take, then it's incumbent upon the supervisors to talk with that officer and help them understand the value of personal and professional development.
Right.
And then we encourage them to look through the training catalog and find that training that fits a skill that they need to enhance.
Okay. Well, look, what have I missed in terms of the future vision as it relates to policing in Rocky Mount under your leadership? And, please share. I know you keep talking and I keep probably derailing you a little bit on your mission, but, I'm just curious and I like to drill down a little bit further sometimes.
Well, no, sir, totally fine. My vision, building stronger relationships with our community is number one priority. Identifying those issues within our city that need to be addressed by our law enforcement within the Rocky Mount Police Department, making sure we develop proactive strategies to deal with those issues within the community on a collaborative basis, meaning we have to continue to talk and engage our community to help us come up with the solutions that fit that particular neighborhood.
Right.
Because not every neighborhood is the same. Right. I just had a couple of calls this week and a few last week where I received calls from citizens, Chief, this is the issue I have. Okay. And then I go and talk with the appropriate staff and we look into it. We many times can deal with those issues, then making sure we have follow through and follow up with our citizens, because that's key. Right. They shouldn't just tell us what the issues are and then we kind of they think we've dealt with it. Sure. Follow up with them to make sure that we've addressed the problem. But that's all part of that engaging our community and having that relationship. So making sure we invest in technology that's going to help us keep identifying where our issues are within our city. And keep enhancing our training of our staff and personnel, making sure that we're providing the right training for the day. Because each year, we have different challenges. Sure. So making sure that we're providing relevant training for our officers to have that will help them deal with those challenges we're seeing within the city of Rocky Mount. And what I see us doing is continue to see our numbers drop, or at least maintain to dropping them, so that way everyone can live a quality of life that they expect and they want, where they can feel safe and secure in their homes and they can raise their families and have a productive life. Sure.
Well, I want to thank you for coming. And more importantly, I've shared this with you in the past. I'm not sure everybody has heard this, but, one of the studies I did when I was running for mayor and then subsequent to after being elected was about public safety, all surrounding it. And the number one, by far, chief challenge that everybody said was public safety, worried about public safety. 50% of the white population said that was number one issue. 69% of their African-American counterparts said that was the number one issue. Now, I don't know what public safety means. Now you got to drill down. Does that mean that, I'm worried about somebody driving by and shooting, or does it mean that, it means a lot of things to a lot of people. But the point is that was number one by a lot, by a lot. And I appreciate you and your force just facing into that fact and facing into the challenges and just saying, hey, look, we don't have all the answers, but you know what? We're going to do everything we can do to make it as safe as possible for everybody. Everybody deserves that opportunity to live in that environment. And I appreciate all that you're doing to build that. And I know that it's a process. It's not an event, it's a process. And I appreciate your commitment to it. And just know this, that I stand ready to help you in any way I possibly can as you try to achieve that goal. And I thank you so much. And I can't wait to take that poll again because I believe that that number will drop, rather precipitously. But, we don't know what we don't know. But I just know that we've seen significant improvement. And I think in large part it's due to you and the team that you've hired, the team that's surrounding you. So thank you. Thank you so much.
And Mary, you brought up a very good point, and thank you for that. But you helped bring that capstone, that study to the Rocky Mount Police Department, and we're continuing to review the findings and the recommendations from that study.
Now, Chief, that was supposed to be our secret. But.
Well, I want to, you've been giving me some accolades, sir, but that study have revealed some recommendations we already have identified ourselves.
Sure.
But we're still continuing to work with those influencers within our community.
Sure.
And we're developing, everyone's here first.
That's right.
We're developing a community wellness survey.
Great.
That we were able to customize for our city using a survey from the Department of Justice. And we're going to be pushing that out really soon.
Yeah, awesome.
And we're getting, hopefully from that survey, we will hear where we are. I may think, how the citizen sees the Rocky Mount Police Department, but I really want to hear from our citizens.
Right.
What is the trust level that they have for our officers? What type of services and programs they feel are working or not working? How do they feel the level of crime is here and within our city? So it's a host of questions that we're going to put to our citizens, and we want some just brutally honest feedback.
You can't address it. If I don't know there's a problem, I can't address it.
You're absolutely correct, Mayor.
It doesn't mean you want to hear it, but it's still your job, right? And you own it. And I appreciate that about you.
Yes, sir. And then hopefully from that survey will lead to some kind of more community engaged conversations.
Right.
And then hopefully a year, 2 years down the road, after we've implemented some strategies based off the surveys, then hopefully we can do that survey again and see some significant drops in the areas where we needed to improve. I
can't wait because I believe that's going to look really great. And I mean, it takes a little while to get there, but anyway, I think you're doing all the right things, and thank you for that. And having that capstone has been a tremendous asset and of value in terms of just trying to prioritize steps, and that's really all it's probably really done. I mean, there's nothing magical about it, but something about just knowing what the data looks like.
You're absolutely correct, and I thank those interns who started that capstone project, and I have three actually good interns working with me now, 2 from East Carolina University and 1 from UNC Chapel Hill. So they're continuing to work with my department and staff and myself on continuing that project.
Hey, thank you so much for being here, Chief. And anything I could do to help, please let me know. And don't be a stranger to this. I think it's a great opportunity for us to communicate